To start up the eDrive fermentation controller, what I do is press the green standby button, making sure everything is ready before proceeding. The controller then starts up and we arrive at the home screen. On the home screen, I can see the date, the time of day, the current program, and the current temperature in the fermentation chamber. The lights at the bottom show me if a defrost cycle is in progress or not. Access to the manual program, on the left for cold, on the right for heat. The last button is used to start or stop the program. To choose a recipe, I press the banner. And this gives me access to the recipe book. Depending on the selected recipe, I can start the program directly by pressing the play button. From this screen, I can also directly use the so-called direct programs, direct code, or direct proofing by pressing these two buttons. If, for example, I want to perform a direct proofing, I press the red button. And we can see that the direct proofing program is now running with the current temperature inside the unit at 15 degrees for a set point of 13 degrees and 85% humidity requested. There is also a countdown to show how long the program has been running. If I want to change my program data directly, I press this part of the screen where I can access the settings for temperature and humidity independently. To select the value to change, I press it so it turns green and then I adjust it using the plus and minus buttons. For example, I'll set the target temperature to 15 degrees. I select the humidity level and lower it to 80% humidity. If I go back, I can see that my values have been saved by the controller, which applies them immediately. To stop the program, I press the stop button. To be able to program a recipe, I first make sure that the button at the bottom right of the screen is green. This means that no program is currently running. If one is running, access to programming will be disabled. I'll go back to my first home screen by clicking the back button. I click on the gear icon, where the three available menus appear. The first menu is the factory menu, the second is for installers, reserved for authorized personnel. The user menu is right here at the very bottom of the screen. To access the programming menu, the unique code is 3210. I confirm. I arrive here on the main programming interface screen. To choose which program I want to modify, I use the screen, working from the top down, and carefully follow each of the various stages that make up the fermentation curve. I select, for example, the pre-recorded program Buns PC. I can, still from top to bottom, modify the program name by clicking on the banner below the curve, which I will rename Test. I confirm. We can see that a change has been made and the diskette icon is now highlighted in blue. To save the parameters, it is important to press this diskette periodically so as not to lose the information entered. If you don't, after 15 seconds, the interface program exits and the changes will not be saved. I'll start with the downward phase of the fermentation, which is the pre-blocking, used to cool the chamber enclosure before the trolleys can be introduced. I can adjust the values by clicking on the banners where the information appears. For example, I'll set the pre-blocking temperature, which was at 2 degrees here, and I'll change it to 0 degrees. To modify a duration in the selected banner, I make sure to click on the left for hours and on the right for minutes. Here, the pre-selected pre-blocking duration is 30 minutes. If I click correctly on the right of my buttons, I can reduce it, for example, to 20 minutes. We can see that the modification has been made. I confirm. Once the pre-blocking is set, I can adjust the other fermentation phases by clicking on the relevant part of the curve. Next, I click on the following part, which is the blocking, meaning the cold temperature while waiting for the products to proof. This is set at 3 degrees Celsius, and I'll change it, for example, to 4 degrees Celsius. The reasoning for the fermentation part is then as follows. The fermentation temperature, which is a set point to be determined, I'll set it, for example, to 20 degrees Celsius. The desired fermentation duration, for example, 6 hours and 30 minutes. And the humidity level requested during heating, for example, 80%. I confirm. I then reach the end day and end time of the program. This information is the most important because automatically, when starting the program, this end time combined with the information entered just before for fermentation will allow the automatic calculation of the blocking timer for positive cold blocking. For example, today is Thursday. I want to finish my program tomorrow, Friday, so I enter day +1. I confirm and I want my products to be ready to bake at 4:30 in the morning. By entering these values, the end of my heating period for the fermentation cell will indeed end at 4:30, the expected time at which the products will be ready to bake. If the chamber is not unloaded at that time, in order to limit product loss or to allow for a slower unloading of the chamber, we can program a hold and a return to cold known as blocked proofing, which I set here, for example here at 5 degrees. Once this particular part of the curve has been fully programmed and set up, my programming process is considered complete, and at that point, I can either allow the controller to automatically return to the user menu or simply let it transition back on its own. Or I select the back arrow until the home screen. My program can then be found in the recipe bar. I retrieve the test program here, which I select. To start it, I press the play button. How to set the date and time on eDrive fermentation. I go back to the first home menu and click on the gears. I access the user settings with the last button at the bottom. I enter the code 3210. By confirming, I return to the recipe programming menu, which is also enhanced in the top bar with 3 tabs. If I select tab 2 of 3, I access today's date and the time. If I want to adjust and switch to daylight saving or winter time, I press to the left of the 2 small central lines. I enter a time here of 16:54. My disk icon lights up. I confirm by pressing it. If I go back to my user menu, we can see that the time change has been successfully applied.